Hey everyone, how's it going? It's your boy Skilled Fawn, and today we are going to attempt to get all the achievements within Sekiro and Elden Ring. For those unfamiliar with me, I'm going to briefly introduce myself. I'm mostly a challenge run content creator who does a lot of videos on the Soulsborne, Need for Speed, and Star Wars franchises. I was introduced to the Souls series at Dark Souls 3's release and fell in love with the game. For Elden Ring's release, I played the Souls games on occasion. I started to become much more serious about content creation, posting videos and such after Elden Ring released. I really enjoyed the game, and since then I've done numerous challenges such as RO1+0, No Deaths, Frenzied Flame perfume bottles only, and so on. Without further ado, let's start with Sekiro. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice released on March 22nd, 2019. This game was made by the developers of Bloodborne and the Dark Souls trilogy. On release and throughout its game's life cycle, Sekiro managed to claim many awards such as 2019's Game of the Year. Inspired by the mechanics and gameplay of its predecessors, FromSoft managed to enhance the formula and make an awesome and beloved game. As we delve into the achievements, I want to mention this will be different from your typical achievement hunt videos. I'll showcase and talk about how to get each one, but we'll also do some other things. I'll showcase my journey through Sekiro using the gamer score, percentage of people that attained the achievement, and the date I acquired the achievement. This will be interesting to track and see how many people have gotten that specific one, when I got the achievement, and the route I took during my first few playthroughs. Starting the game and shortly thereafter, the player will quickly and easily attain their first achievement. This is granted after receiving the sword from Lord Kuro. After battling with Genichiro, the player will receive the Shinobi prosthetic, which allows them to pick up and use various items throughout the world. These include shurikens, axes, shields, and so on. At some point during the journey, unless by chance you are a deflection master on your first playthrough, the player will fall in battle. Using a resurrection node, the player can return from the dead and receive the next achievement. The first boss achievement on the list is the horseback riding samurai. On the first few playthroughs, this guy can be extremely tough and be a hindrance to get ahead. One piece of evidence that would back up my claim is the massive drop off with the achievement list percent completed. For this boss, the achievement completion rate was fairly high, but after this point, a lot of the achievement completion rates are much lower. The Memorial Mob achievement is fairly self-explanatory. Basically just find one of the various merchants throughout the lands. Only thing that has me curious is how the completion rate is higher than the horseback boss, since the merchant is right after this boss fight. I know before Chained Ogre there is an NPC that I believe is also a merchant. As I am unsure, let me and others know down below. Lady Butterfly is up next. She's quite difficult at first, but once the player gets her attack pattern down, she becomes much easier. She has two phases, with the second phase using a bunch of ghost minions to help attack the player. And if you don't know what to do for that, make sure you use the snap seeds, because I didn't know that at first and was getting absolutely destroyed. When this game was released, I was in my final year of high school and graduating soon. Lady Butterfly, I remember having a ton of fun in her fights, especially since it's very rhythmic. To this day, I still really enjoy it. The next boss on the list is still one of my favorites to this day. Genichiro Ashina is the boss that attacks the player at the beginning of the game, and has a few other encounters elsewhere. At the top of Ashina Castle is one of these places. Similar to Lady Butterfly, he can be quite difficult. Once the player gets a good grasp of the combos, then the fight becomes much more manageable. Make sure to punish his openings and try to push him into a corner while attacking. This helps to keep the pressure going. I really enjoy his various boss designs, but most notable for me is his inner variation where he does that Sakura dance combat art, which is just so cool to see. And it's even cooler that once you defeat him, you actually get it. Guardian Ape was the next achievement that I completed. This was more than a few days after the Genichiro achievement, so I'd have to assume I was dying a lot in between those dates getting used to this fight. This makes a lot of sense because Guardian Ape is very different from the bosses shown previously. The first phase, the ape doesn't use a sword like most bosses, so the player has to get used to pairing the hand attacks, which is tough. It doesn't help that this boss inflicts a ton of damage if caught off guard. This is definitely one reason why the achievement completion rate is low, because of how difficult a challenge Guardian Ape is to overcome. Current day, I've played through the game many times, and I've grown very familiar with this fight, so now it's more so a piece of cake. Back in the beginning, it was a slaughterfest with me as the main course. Following day, I tackled folding screen monkeys. Today, most people know how much of a joke these bosses are, but in the beginning, I didn't know what to do, so it definitely took some practice and time. How was the achievement collected afterwards? Located at the top of Ashina Castle, where we fought Genichiro the second time, he asks us to forsake the Iron Code or Sekiro can obey. Depending on the player's choice, this will either lead to the Shura or the various other endings. Choosing to obey the Iron Code, siding with Kuro, will have the player fight Owl, Sekiro's father. I remember how difficult he was in my first playthrough, and it shows that it took a few days to complete. Today, he can still be a nuisance, but at least I have much more experience in the fight. At this point in the game, the player will have access most if not all the areas. Doing so will reward the player with the Ashina Traveler achievement and a nice 60 gamer score. Corrupted Monk is the next boss achievement I got, and this can be a tough fight on the first few playthroughs. Second phase of this fight, if it's not known to jump off the top of the tree to then fatally stab the boss, then yeah, this fight is immensely more difficult. Even so, the third phase can really throw players off, even if they are accustomed to it. Even to this day, those third phase attacks can be tricky with how quick and deceptive they are. Afterwards though, the player will receive a key item that allows them to purchase additional items from merchants. With many bosses and enemies defeated, the player will have a lot of skill points to use and upgrade abilities. If chosen, the player can receive the Master of the Arts achievement when they grasp the inner mysteries of any combat style, thus completing the skill tree. This can be done fairly easy, and many of the final skills on the tree are great combat arts. Similar to many other Souls games, there is at least one cinematic puzzle boss fight, whether that's Dragon God in Demon Souls, Beta Chaos in Dark Souls, and a many variation of Storm Rulers fight. Well, in Sekiro, that fight is Divine Dragon, and out of most of these types of fights, I think this works the best. It is a lot less frustrating and much more manageable than Beta Chaos, so the RNG factor, the player doesn't have to worry about. Though I enjoy Rykard's fight and the others like him, it is much cooler to use just straight lightning to destroy a boss. Ultimately, once we defeat the dragon and obtain its tears, we unlock the next achievement. The next achievement is determined by the player's exploration. Ultimate Healing Gourd is achieved when the player fully upgrades the Healing Gourd. There are 10 Gourd Seeds in total. The player receives one charge at the beginning of the game, and the rest are spread throughout the lands. Found in boss fights or hidden away in chests, the player will need to explore to get this achievement, though it is greatly worth the hard work. I'm actually pleasantly surprised I got all the Gourd Seeds in my first playthrough, as I thought I would have focused more so on the bosses. As the player goes through the game, they will encounter this massive serpent from time to time. The first encounter has them sneak past it, then stab it in the eye. Interesting thing about this is that this is one of, if not the only times where Sekiro gets blood on him. Unlike Bloodborne where you are drenched in blood after killing a single enemy. Funnily enough, though, when the blood gets on Sekiro, it looks more like tomato sauce or paste rather than blood. Or at least just this red liquid that's not blood. Taking down the serpent will result in another achievement. Similarly with the previous Healing Gourd achievement, the next achievement also rewards exploration and looting. Running around Ashina and the nearby lands to find all the prosthetic tools will give the player 30 gamer score. This is a win-win since you get gamer score and the access to whatever tool is right for you. Whether it's the shurikens or the mist feathers, each is fun to use and has their uses. Subsequently, I must have been exploring areas I went to previously and found Guardian Ape's body lying on the floor. Beating the Duo Ape boss won't grant the player the achievement until the Guardian Ape's immortality is severed. Next, I acquired all ninjutsu techniques. This is fairly simple and easy one to get since there are only 3 in the game, and most are given on the main progression path. Unlocking this achievement will give the player a nice 30 gamer score. A few days later, I unlocked the Demon of Hatred achievement, which is given after defeating the boss. I remember being extremely caught off guard when I first saw and fought this boss, since it felt like it didn't belong in this game. Instead, it felt more like a Dark Souls, Bloodborne playstyle. Because of me struggling with this boss, I ended up doing that cheese that caused him to fall off the side of the cliff. Funny story, but I have a short on my channel that was actually taken from one of my first few playthroughs, and that was the Demon of Hatred cheese. It was one of my earlier shorts, and I was happy to see people found it enjoyable. Months later, either by frustration with the next boss due to my inexperience or things in life getting in the way, I ended up taking down Sword Saint Ishin Ashina. He's one of the tougher bosses in Sekiro, so it makes sense that I could have had a bit of trouble with him. Using a sword in his first phase, then pulling a spear for the next 2 phases, Ishin is a deadly adversary. Make sure to watch for his deceptive attacks and use the lightning to reverse it back to him for extra damage. Ultimately, we take down Ishin. With Ishin defeated, we also receive the Immortal Severance achievement. This is one of the various endings in the game. This is one of the simplest in terms of end story game achievements. Now, I ended up taking a bit of a break from the game, with university studies and other things taking my time, so I didn't end up getting the next achievement until 5 years later. Now, looking back on this time, I definitely did play it on occasion, but just never went hunting for achievements. I remember my junior year, my friend and I would sit down and play through this game after classes, and it was fun times. Anyways, we come back to the game and get the Lazuli upgrade achievement, which is given once Lapis Lazuli is used to upgrade any tool to its limit. Getting back into the game again, doing challenge runs and other videos covering the game, made me really enjoy the game like when it first released. Doing various runs such as AP1, New Game Plus 7, Demon Bell, Charmless, No Deaths, and other runs made me really become a lot more accustomed to the gameplay and also the progression path. One ending and boss fights that I hadn't completed yet was the Shura ending. First, the player needs to side with her father Owl at the pinnacle moment before they reach Fountainhead Palace. If chosen, the player will fight Emma the Gentle Blade and Ishin Ashina. Out of the two, Emma is the easiest and has very little health. Ishin, on Emma's defeat, will fight Sekiro. This is different to Sword Saint Ishin, because then he was quote-unquote reborn and much more deadly, though he still is deadly. Using various flame attacks, the player will have to be extremely careful for those deadly combos. In the end though, we take down Ishin and claim another achievement. Since we defeated Emma and Ishin Ashina, we completed the Shura ending and collected its achievement. And oh my gosh, this is one of the coolest endings in the game. And that cutscene with him holding both of the immortal blades just goes so hard. Height of Technique was the next one I received, and this was a few months after the previous achievement. I believe this was for my AP1 video, and so I decided to acquire all the skills to give myself a better chance in the challenge. Getting this one gives the player a nice 60 gamer score. In Sekiro, there are 3 owl boss fights. First is the pivotal moment atop Ashina Castle. Second is the memory in Harada Estate. And third is in the quote-unquote DLC Gauntlet, where his moves are insanely enhanced. The player will only receive achievements for his first and second fights. To get to the second fight, the player will have to do a bunch of steps talking with various NPCs and collecting items. If completed correctly, the player will receive a special item that allows them to enter Harada State again, but instead in a different memory. This is easily one of, if not the hardest fights in the game, besides maybe Demon of Hatred. A lot of his attack combos into each other and deal insane amount of damage. One thing I really enjoy about this fight is when Owl sends the flaming owl through the air to then lunge at Sekiro with that jab. Using a Makiri counter builds up a ton of posture damage and is just such a cool series of events. Ultimately, we take down Great Shinobi Owl. By this point, we have defeated every boss in Sekiro, not necessarily in one playthrough, but overall. Getting this achievement gives the player 60 gamer score, and I have to say that the achievement icon for this one goes super hard. This was definitely super satisfying to obtain. The next achievement is hidden a bit. In this area to the side of Fountainhead Palace, the player can find an NPC that watches over the Great Colored Carp. The special item is in hand, the player can feed the carp, then find its corpse in the Guardian Apes boss fight. Completing this specific playthrough, we get the purification ending since we completed all the necessary steps with the NPCs and defeated Great Shinobi Owl at Harada Estate. This was definitely a sad cutscene to watch, but it was interesting to see that Kuro goes on and still has Sekiro's sacrifice in mind. The last round of achievements, I decided to stream myself grinding for these. The tedious work required for the last few achievements is a lot. The first one I decided to go for was Peak Physical Strength, which rewarded me when the player fully upgrades their vitality and posture to their limit. Out of the rest of the end game achievements, this was the easiest since I had most of the progression already. But the issue that arose was I didn't know which bosses I hadn't defeated yet. Because of this, I had to start basically from the beginning and take down each boss one at a time, or at least the bosses that I really wasn't sure on. It took some time and effort since there are many bosses and locations where the player can find prayer beads. If you're struggling with this achievement, I recommend what I just mentioned. Go through the bosses and the loot locations one by one. There are 40 prayer beads total, so yeah, this is a bit of a grind if you're doing a new playthrough. Upon completion, we receive the achievement and also get a nice boost to our health and posture meter. Subsequently, I aim to get the Dragon's Homecoming achievement. Out of the endgame story achievements, this is the most complicated and tedious. There are lots of places where the player can easily mess up, either locking themselves out of the questline or progressing too far through the game, thus missing the questline. The player starts by talking and going to the monk at Senpu Temple before fighting Genichiro. If fought afterwards, the player will have to go through the cave system to find it on his corpse. Next, you will need to speak with the Divine Child of Rejuvenation a few times. After a while, she will start to feel sick, and giving her a persimmon will help her to feel better alongside receiving the special item, Rice for Kuro. Giving Kuro the rice before Divine Dragon will progress the quest line. Again, we talk with the Divine Child a few more times, and in separate locations, until we eventually have to get both Serpentine fruits. The first is found underground and requires the player to use the ninjutsu technique to trick the serpent. Once passed, the item can be obtained. The second can be found near the Senpu Temple. Similarly with the first, the player must use a ninjutsu technique on the specific enemy that will raise this kite into the air. Afterwards, the player needs to grapple across and plunge attack the serpent below. When the serpent is hit, the player will receive the second and last fruits. Coming back to the Divine Child, we feed her the fruits, eavesdrop a bit, and talk with her again to receive the frozen tears. We go through the game as usual and beat the final boss. At the end, we use the frozen tears and get this awesome, bittersweet ending. The second to last achievement is Master of the Prosthetic. This is easily the longest achievement in terms of time investment. After completing the Dragon's Homecoming achievement, I rang the Demon Bell. The Demon Bell will increase the chance I receive rewards from enemies, alongside having the Senpu Asoric text skills that boost rewards received. Will make things much simpler and easier. I thought out a game plan, then researched which upgrade materials I needed and the best places to find them. A lot of the grinding ended up being in a few locations, but most notable was Sunken Valley and near Demon of Hatred. This helped me get a bunch of various gunpowders and the rare fulminated mercury. Ultimately, we get all the materials and upgrade all of the prosthetics. Because we got all the prosthetics, this means that we received all other achievements, and thus get the final achievement labeled Sekiro. This is nice 70 gamer score and feels rewarding since only 2.66% of people have received this. This was us getting all the achievements in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, one of my favorite games. There were 34 achievements in total, and they added up to be 1000 gamer score in the end. With Sekiro completed, I set my sights on the next game. Enjoying the video so far? Click the like button, comment, and subscribe to help support me and the channel. I have another channel too, where I post daily streams and highlights if that's something you are interested in. This will be linked down below alongside my other socials. Now, let's dive into Elden Ring. Elden Ring was a game released on February 25th, 2022. Later, Elden Ring would receive several awards and claim Game of the Year. Since its release, there has been a DLC that is released, which received mixed results on launch, but overall the community praised From Software for their work. As we delve deeper into the achievements, I want to mention that this will be different from your typical achievement hunt videos. I'll showcase and talk about how to get each one, but we'll do some other things. I'll showcase my journey through Elden Ring using the gamer score, percentage of people that attain the achievement, and a date I acquired the achievement. This will be interesting to track to see how many people have gotten that specific one, when I got the achievement, and the route I took during my first few playthroughs. Getting into the game, the first achievement the player will receive is arriving at Round Table Hold. This is easy since Melina is on the main progression path towards Stormvale Castle. It's hard to miss the grace. After talking with her the first time, then resting at another grace, she will offer to take the player there. Once in Round Table Hold, the player can level up weapons, talk with NPCs, and get Remembrance boss weapons. I want to quickly mention that I played Elden Ring on its release, so during the first playthrough there were little to no hints, just figure things out yourself. I played this game a lot with my friends in college, and we had a blast fighting the bosses and going around the areas. The next achievement is collected upon taking down Margit, the Fell Omen. The first few playthroughs, Margit can be extremely difficult, especially since a lot of his attacks are delayed. I speak from experience since I died numerous times trying to figure out his combos. In the end though, we defeat Margit the Fell Omen and claim another achievement. Funnily enough, I ended up going to Weeping extremely early on in my first playthrough, which looking back on it was extremely smart. In Weeping, you are able to collect numerous Sacred Tear Flasks, alongside getting some really useful weapons. Next achievement kills 2 birds with 1 stone. As we are so underleveled, defeating Leonine Misbegotten will give us an extremely good weapon and some nice runes. The Ash of War on that weapon is extremely underrated for first playthrough in my opinion. Once we take down the beast, we claim his weapon, runes, and another achievement. One of the last achievements with a fairly high completion rate is Shardbearer Godric. This is usually the first remembrance boss the player will come across. Now, the first couple of playthroughs can be tough as nails, especially as phase 2 with the way fire behaves in this game, ricocheting off of things. After this point, a lot of the achievements will be steadily decreasing, which is interesting since Sekiro there was a massive drop off after that early game horseback boss. After taking down Godric, the player will have access to Liurnia and Raya Lucaria. There are lots of things to do here, such as finding a piece of the Halig tree, talking with Ronnie, and finding more boss fights. One such fight is Red Wolf of Radagon. Enjoy this fight, but find it annoying since usually the player destroys this boss's health within 4 to 5 hits. The Wolf, even in an RO 1+0 run, is pretty easy in my opinion. Regardless, on the first few playthroughs, it will be another story. Make sure to avoid the magic projectile attacks and play for openings. One usual trick is after the first horizontal swing, jump up and go for an attack. This will inflict massive posture damage and a fair amount of physical damage. Subsequently, I completed the Great Rune achievement, which was rewarded after restoring the power of a Great Rune. Since I've only taken down Godric by this point in my first playthrough, it would have had to been his. To do this, the player must defeat a remembrance boss. Then they must find the divine tower associated with that boss. Melania's is in the center of the ocean, Morgoth's near the Forbidden Land, etc. Getting any Great Rune and activating it is better than not having one, besides Moog, because his is for PvP. Progressing further into Raya Lucaria, we eventually find Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. She is another shard bearer, similarly to Godric. Her first phase is fairly easy, just hit the scholars with a glowing aura to cause her to come crashing down towards the ground. Once she is sent to her second phase, things get a lot more tricky. First, she is a ranged magic user, so this requires a slightly different playstyle. Secondly, she has a variety of spirit summons at her disposal, so after some time, the player will need to dodge the summons and her magic attacks. Make sure to play things patiently and read her attacks. If you are having a hard time, I recommend summoning other players to help in the fight. Taking her down, we receive an achievement and also get another Great Rune. With Relana down and wondering where to go next, I figured I wanted to head towards the Erd Tree and investigate what's near its base. Since I didn't know where the Dectus medallion pieces were at the time, I eventually found myself in the ruin-strewn precipice. This is one route to get into Altus Plateau, the area that surrounds the Erd Tree and the capital. Going through the various sections of the precipice, we ultimately come across Magma Worm Makar. Makar used to be tarnished like us, but gave in to the dragon communion that was being incentivized since Baal and the Drakes became traitors to the dragons. Similarly with Margit, this boss has a lot of staggered attacks that can be tough to read. Inflict as much damage as possible during his second phase transition, so that things will be slightly easier during the fight. In the end, after defeating him, we receive another achievement. For this point, I had progressed up to and entered Redbane Castle and Caelid. Since we have gone into Altus Plateau, we are able to fight Shardbearer Radahn. Now I should talk about the elephant in the room. This is pre-patch Radahn on release, so his hitboxes were pretty atrocious. Nonetheless, it was an extremely fun fight with NPCs. If you have access to a rot weapon early on, this would be a good time to use it, since Radahn is extremely weak to rot. I definitely struggled with this boss and died more times than I care to admit, but that made it even more rewarding. Taking him down, we get another achievement and a Great Rune. Because we took down Radahn and got that cutscene at the end with the stars crashing down, I was really curious to see what was there. Progressing through Nokron, we come across one of the various mimic tiers. Entering this arena, the boss will copy the player's exact loadout. Because of this, players realized that they could equip nothing, making the fight a piece of cake. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that my first run, but it didn't really matter in the end since I took it down on the first or second try. Ultimately, we get some larval tiers and access to more of Nokron. Further in Nokron and near a waterfall, we find Valiant Gargoyles. At first, there will be only one boss on the player. Later, a second gargoyle will join the fight. These guys can be quite tough since no status effects work on them, such as bleed or frost. The best way to take these guys down is to try and melt the first one right as you enter the fight. This is easier said than done, and is build dependent, but definitely worthwhile if you are able to. At the very least, you can inflict enough damage to hopefully take it out when the second is running towards you. Taking them down will let the player go underneath Lendel, the capital. The next achievement that I acquired was taking down Dragonkin Soldier of Noxtella. Funny story, but this boss was one of the first things I showed on my channel when this game was released. Back then, I was only posting shorts that are similar to TikToks. I was playing with my college friend and we went in the fight together. Since this was the early days of Elden Ring, Kama Azor hadn't been nerfed to the ground yet, so I used his full power. We had fun messing around and defeating bosses similarly to how we showed Dragonkin Soldier. This short to this day is one of my top viewed videos of all time. Now this boss can be quite difficult if you aren't cheesing it, so make sure to play things cautiously. Similar to a lot of other bosses in the game, this boss has a ton of staggered attacks, so just watch out for that. In the end, we take it down and get another achievement. Elmer of the Briar is the next boss I defeated. A tough bell-bearing hunter, Elmer can be tough for those unfamiliar. Best thing to do against him and the other bell-bearing hunters is to stay near his backside and get the shield slam down attack. If played properly, Elmer will continue to do the animation, allowing easy damage, just rinse repeat. Progressing into Volcano Manor, we eventually come across Godskin Noble. I died a ton of times to this boss in my first playthrough. It wasn't until a couple of playthroughs after where I realized that parrying this fool makes things so much easier. Obviously, it was still hard until I got the parry timings correct, but then the fight was such a breeze. During the fight, it helps that the player gets to listen to one of the best soundtracks the game has to offer. At the end of Volcano Manor, we have the option to teleport. Here, God-Devouring Serpent and Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, challenge us. This is easily one of the most action-packed and spectacular fights in Elden Ring. Similar to Storm King in Demon Souls or Yorm the Giant in Dark Souls 3, the player is given a weapon in their arena to take them down. In Rykard's fight, the player gets the Serpent Hunter, which when used against the Serpent, shows its real power with white light. It is unfortunate since this is the only fight this weapon has those attack animations, but still is cool nonetheless. Going into the capital and progressing close to the Erd Tree, we find the next boss, Godfrey First Elden Lord. This is the Golden Shade version of the boss, and the actual version can be found later on. Besides the Erd Tree, we find Shardbearer Morgott. This is the midpoint of the game, depending on where the player chooses to go. Morgott was posing as Margit in Stormvale Castle in order to protect Godric, the weakest Shardbearer, and the Erd Tree. First few playthroughs, the player will struggle since a lot of his previous attacks have been massively enhanced. Getting him below half health, Morgott will go into his second phase. Here, he will use his accursed blood to try and bleed the player. Because we had already been to Raya Lucaria, I wanted to check out the nearby structures. At some point, I happened to come across Caria Manor, where Royal Knight Loretta and Ronnie can be found. This boss is usually pretty laughable. I remember on my first playthrough having much more trouble with the guys leading up to the boss rather than the boss itself. By the time the player comes here, they are often fairly leveled up, so they just melt her health bar. Afterwards, I headed into an underground area once again, but this time it was take down Ancestor Spirit. This is similar to Royal Knight Loretta for the fact that, yeah, they are pretty laughable bosses. I want to quickly say that it is crazy that I was able to get so many achievements in such a short amount of time. Within 1 to 2 weeks from Elden Ring's release, I managed to rack up a bunch, but I'm happily surprised. Taking it down, we get some runes and collect 15 gamer score. One of my least favorite fights in Elden Ring is Fire Giant. Since the game released and I got up to his arena, I instantly disliked his fight. To this day, I still dislike his fight, but it's much more manageable. Still, those dang fire attacks are a pain to deal with. As easy as Godric is, I feel that the one tough aspect to him is the RNG of where the fire will ricochet and bounce off of. Similarly, with Dragonkin Soldier of Noxtella, I ended up posting a short on Fire Giant. This time, it was a gravity exploit where he would fall and die. Needless to say, it was extremely funny to watch and accomplish. Commander Nile is found in Castle Sol, located in mountaintops of the Giants. A challenging boss, Nile employs powerful frost attacks and summons 2 Phantom Knights to assist him. My first encounter with Nile was a mix of frustration and determination, as I kept misjudging the timing of his attacks. After several attempts, I found out that taking out his Phantom Knights quickly, then taking out Commander Nile was the best strategy. Defeating Nile rewarded me with an achievement, another key victory on my Elden Ring journey. Lich Dragon Fortisax is a hidden boss found in the deep root depths, requiring progression in Fia's questline. This fight is a visual spectacle with lightning strikes and death blight filling the arena. The first time I faced Fortisax, I struggled with his sweeping lightning attacks, but eventually learned to time my rolls to avoid the brunt of the damage. It also took some time getting used to the lightning that lingers around the player. Boss's design and atmosphere are some of the most breathtaking in the game, especially the music for this boss. It just goes so hard. Estelle, Natural Born of the Void, is one of the most unique bosses in Elden Ring. Found deep past the Grand Cloister and the Lake of Rot, this otherworldly creature uses a mix of cosmic magic and devastating melee attacks. I vividly remember my first encounter with Estelle. It felt like fighting some type of bloodborne monster. Its grab attack caught me off guard multiple times. After learning its pattern and staying close to its head, we take Estelle down and receive yet another achievement. Setting the Erd Tree aflame marks a pivotal moment in the game. signifying the change in the lands between. This event is tied to progressing the story and is one of the most cinematic moments in Elden Ring. Witnessing the Erdtree engulfed in flames was awe-inspiring. It's sad to see Melina, the player's maiden, nobly sacrifice herself so that we may advance. I guess I can understand now why Vike sought to save his maiden using the Flame of Frenzy. The Godskin duo is a notorious fight located in crumbling Fair Missoula. Consisting of Godskin Apostle and Godskin Noble, this duo is a test of patience and stamina management. This fight was brutal during my first playthrough, as I struggled to deal with both enemies simultaneously. My RO1+0 run, I kid you not, I spent more than 15 plus hours on these two guys. It was pure pain, and one more attempt turned into 50 plus. My first playthrough, it was really tough fighting these guys, but especially when both are in their second phase form. After what felt like dozens of attempts, I finally overcame the duo and earned the next achievement. To earn the Godslaying Armament achievement, players must upgrade a weapon to its highest stage, and this is plus 25 for Smithing Stone and plus 10 for Somber Smithing Stone weapons. This is a key milestone as it requires dedication to farming the smithing stones. Seeing the weapon fully upgraded is always incredibly satisfying. Malekith is the guardian of deaths and death and one of the most challenging bosses in the game. His second phase, where he wields the Black Blade, is particularly punishing due to his aggressive combos and AoE attacks. I spent hours learning his moveset and optimizing my build for this fight. To this day, he is still one of my favorite bosses in the game, and I always enjoy getting up to his fight. I like to nowadays use the Blasphemous Claw in order to parry Malekith's golden attacks. This is something I recommend if you are struggling with this boss. Defeating Malekith granted me one of the most hard-earned achievements in my Elden Ring journey, besides maybe Melania. Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree, is an upgraded version of Royal Knight Loretta, found in Caria Manor. This fight is always super fun to play. Her magic attacks are faster and more powerful than her earlier counterpart. Once the player recognizes the windows to punish the boss, such as after her magic blade attacks, things become a lot easier to manage. Eventually we take her down and get another achievement. Melania, Blade of Miquella, is widely regarded as one of the toughest bosses in Elden Ring. Her aggressive attacks, lifesteal mechanic, and infamous waterfowl and clone attacks make her a nightmare for most players. My first encounter with her was nothing short of humbling, as I died countless times. I ended up summoning another player and we beat her together. It wasn't until I started doing multiple playthroughs that I really understood her attacks. The first couple of challenge runs, I really wanted to do no-hit runs on her, and so I spent hours and hours learning her moves. That experience helped tremendously with the RO1+0 run. Taking down Melania is always super satisfying, but the first time it earned me the Shardbearer Melania achievement. Dragonlord Placidusax is an optional boss in Crumbling Fair Missoula, and one of the most visually stunning fights in the game. His massive size and powerful lightning attacks create an unforgettable experience. The DLC being released and Bale the Dread having such rich lore makes Placy's fight that much cooler in my opinion. The first time I fought Placy was an interesting experience. I ended up having this bug where Placy stood in place and I was able to get a massive Comet Azor on him. Don't even know how that worked, but yeah. Nowadays, this fight has become a lot easier. I find that Malekith's Black Blade is amazing for this fight, but specifically the Ash of War. Timing and patience are key to defeating him, so make sure to keep that in mind. Especially for that, Medeer laser beams, you gotta be careful. Eventually we defeat Placy, earning another achievement. The battle against Horlu is one of the final challenges in Elden Ring. His relentless aggression and devastating area of effect attacks make him a formidable opponent. In his second phase, Horlu has so many grab attacks that can be hard to read if you are new to the fight. To this day, I still think his phase 1 version is way more menacing and cool, but it's still interesting to note that he abandons everything to stop us. The Age of Stars achievement is tied to completing Ranni's questline and unlocking her ending. This questline is one of the most intricate in the game, requiring exploration, puzzle solving, and boss fights. Witnessing the Age of Stars ending was a fitting conclusion to my first journey through Elden Ring. The Age of Stars ending was the most completed of the endings compared to the others. I don't remember off the top of my head, but From Software released a bunch of stats shortly after the game was released, and this was the highest. And I will try to find the image and post it in the video so you guys can see, or I'll at least link it down below. The next milestone in my journey was defeating Shardbearer Mohg, also known as Mohg, Lord of Blood. Mohg's ability to cast Nihil in a second phase transition often catch players massively off guard, especially with the health drain mechanic. I remember attempting this fight multiple times. My early playthroughs and still to this day, I still think Moog can be incredibly difficult to combat. The second phase can be the trickiest since he sprays blood flame all over the ground. Moog's defeat rewarded me with another achievement in the satisfaction of conquering one of Elden Ring's toughest shard bears. Taking a short break from the game, I returned and encountered Regal Ancestor Spirit, a visually stunning boss that embodies the ethereal beauty of the lands between. This fight in most cases is not challenging compared to others. I do have to say though that I was caught off guard with its lifesteal mechanic the first time I played. It is interesting and fun to fight this boss, especially when it takes different forms of the beasts and has different combo and attacks. Ultimately, we defeated Regal Ancestor Spirit, which earned me another achievement. This is where things get interesting. I ended up taking a break from Elden Ring for a bit. When I returned back to the game, I ended up doing a bunch of challenge runs and my joy for the game was renewed. I did play throughout the time frame, but the next achievement was obtained nearly a year later. Achieving the Elden Lord ending is the culmination of one's journey through the lands between. This ending represents the fractured state of the world, but this is depending on the player's choice. Did the player use the rune acquired from Fia to infuse Deathblight into the Elden Ring, or perhaps Dung Eaters for an endless curse on the world, or perhaps nothing? Either way, the player will get this achievement. On my first playthrough, I did not get this, and as I progressed through the game, I felt more so intrigued with Ronnie's questline. Witnessing the cinematic conclusion and unlocking the achievement was incredibly satisfying. This marked another milestone in my journey. A few days later, I ventured deep within the sewers of Lindell to eventually come across Moog the Omen. This is a variant of his Lord of Blood counterpart, but only has his Lord of Blood's Phase 1 attacks. While lacking the same grandeur, this fight still has presented its own challenges. The confined space and a mix of physical and blood flame attacks makes for an intense encounter. Overcoming this version of Moog granted me another achievement and the sense of accomplishment, but there was something also lurking below after his arena. After defeating Moog the Omen, the player can venture even deeper below the capital. Here we find many merchants that have passed away, going mad. Ledge jumping is always a challenge in Souls games, but this might be one of the toughest. At the bottom we find the Three Fingers and Embrace the Frenzied Flame. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending takes a darker turn compared to the others. This ending signifies the player's complete surrender to chaos. The haunting imagery of the lands between consumed by madness is super creepy but cool to witness. Nowadays, this is my favorite ending, and it is such a shame that after completing the game, the player doesn't keep the Frenzied Flame head. The next round of achievements I completed months after the previous one. This was because I decided to achievement hunt Sekiro, Elden Ring, and Bloodborne. These achievements were the more grindy ones, so I figured I'd get these last. The first was collecting all legendary armaments. To achieve this achievement, I had to track down all the game's most iconic weapons. The journey was a mix of exploration and patience, as some of the weapons were hidden in obscure locations or required me defeating some weird bosses. Finally, after acquiring the last legendary weapon, we get the achievement. Collecting all legendary ashen remains were similarly tedious, having to run around the lands between and gather various items. Some of these ashen remains are useful, like Tish, but a majority of these underperform in boss fights. Next, I gathered all legendary talismans. Some talismans required venturing into various areas or completing NPC quest lines. A lot of these talismans are incredibly useful, so it felt a lot more rewarding than the remains achievement. Finishing this collection felt like an accomplishment in of itself, and earning the achievement was the cherry on top. The legendary sorceries and incantation achievement was Magical Journey, literally. I delved deep into ancient ruins and defeated powerful enemies to uncover these legendary spells. My favorite moment was slowly walking over this invisible bridge to get the Rain of Star spell. I died so many times falling off. Collecting the last spell, we eventually get the achievement. Finally, collecting all legendary sorceries and incantations, I achieved the ultimate goal, unlocking every achievement in Elden Ring. This milestone marked the end of this journey through the lands between, testament to perseverance and the love for the game. In the end, we ended up collecting all achievements in Sekiro and Elden Ring. Is it difficult to collect all the achievements in each game? Well, I would definitely say it's difficult, but more so it was time-consumingly tedious. The perfect example of this, I think, is collecting the various upgrade components for the prosthetic tools in Sekiro. Still, a lot of the achievements are very doable without the large time investment. The more tedious ones will be annoying, but it will feel that much more rewarding when you complete them. There were 34 achievements in Sekiro and 42 in Elden Ring, totaling 76. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this video. Compared to my other videos, this is a rather long one, so I'm interested to see your responses. Do you enjoy the longer videos, or do you prefer the shorter ones? If you enjoy them, I also have a Bloodborne trophy video coming soon. Depending on your feedback, I will think about doing Demon Souls and the Dark Souls trilogy. In the near future, I will be doing a channel update video, so be on the lookout for that too. Thank you for watching the video. Make sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Try to do something kind for someone today, whether it's a small or large gesture. This is your boy, Skilled Fawn, and I'm out.